Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. Loads of love to each and every one of you. Don't forget to go and get that quintessential glass of drink that you enjoy, especially if it's hot out there and you want to be refreshed and cooled down. If it's cold where you are, then you're going to need something warm. And if it's something unusual, let me know about it, because I'm fascinated to hear from you. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, I lifted the plant pot, searching for the keys. Oh, there they were. I retrieved them from their hiding place. They jingled in my hands. I could hear barking, yapping and scratching at the front door. I turned the lock. It clicked. The door creaked open. It most certainly needed oiling, I thought to myself. Two excited dogs burst through the door like rockets taking off, bounding towards me, their tails wagging vigorously while their bodies jiggled excitedly. They were always thrilled to see me, every single time. The energy in the house was permeated with an excited jubilance because these dogs knew exactly where I was taking them. They could already envisage smells on the glorious green turf that they would soon encounter, sprinkled with the exciting, strange essence of other dogs, leaving behind their scent markings on the hiking trail. An invisible telephone exchange between different dog breeds, announcing that they recently had been in the area. I got down on my knees, greeting the two excitable dogs, a bulldog called Zodiac and a Boston Terrier called Sweetie Pie. "Hello, boys! And how are you today? Fancy a walk? Of course you do." They knew exactly what I was talking about, as the word walk always seems to invite an enthusiastic response from all of our furry friends. I retrieved the leads from the hooks in the entrance hall. Maria Munro's impeccable, well-presented home smelt of furniture polish, along with a refreshing citrusy bouquet of lemons. It was meticulously clean, ordered and scrupulously organised, reflecting her methodical personality, as everything in her home had its perfect place. She was a librarian in Portland with a savvy efficiency. I glanced at the sparkling windows of her home. They gleamed brightly in the morning sun, without a smudge mark in sight, while the radiant light danced through the living area of her sitting room. I felt a measure of shame when I discerned how meticulously clean and shining everything was, without a dust particle in sight, while in contrast at my home there were shopping bags that hadn't been unpacked yet, and dishes from last night's dinner still soaking there in the sink. I had a sneaking suspicion that if you ran your hand down the tops of my doors, there would be dusts on your fingers, and a lot of it too. But I was certain the tops of Maria's doors would be spotless. On impulse, I decided to test this theory of mine out. I wanted to see how thorough Maria was as a cleaner, so I quickly rubbed my hands along one of her doors, longing to find an obscure piece of dust that she had neglected to attend to. But not a chance. As I had expected, there wasn't a drop of dust in sight. How was it possible to keep one's house so squeaky clean, especially when you had a full-time job, I wondered in awe. I felt somewhat ashamed of my great lack of cleaning prowess. It was most certainly a job I hated and despised like most people, always putting it off to the very last minute. Before long, I was walking with the two dogs down the long village green that fringed the boundary lines of all the properties in our neighbourhood. It was a rural area, not far from Portland. The dogs bounded happily beside me as we trailed past several houses until we finally reached the hiking trail that started on the edge of the green, trailing upwards through a farmer's field that was usually full of grazing cows. We'd have to get through the hollow space in between the picket fencing on both sides of the meadow. Then we would reach a rugged clearing that was almost always muddy, and potholes were filled with water, but when the weather was dry, the ground would crack. On the edge of the clearing was a very, very pretty sylvan, full of the most exquisite towering Douglas firs that the intrepid explorer David Douglas once described as one of the most striking, truly graceful objects in nature. I happen to heartily agree. As you've probably guessed, I'm a dog walker. It wasn't a job I actively actually pursued. It somehow landed in my lap. I'd often volunteered to walk people's dogs just because I loved animals. Then I began to get paid for my services, so walking dogs became a way of life for me, an intrinsic part of life that I'd never ever considered before, but I didn't look back from it. Most people referred to me as the dog lady. I simply loved dogs. As we reached the clearing, Zodiac made a beeline for a pile of horsemuck on the edge of the woods. He began to hoover it down gutsily. Try as I might to drag him away from the pile of crap, he was having nothing of it. He refused to budge, cramming the horse manure in his mouth in a frenzied enthusiasm, as if he was tucking into prize fillet of beef from the butcher's. I knew better than to wrestle with a bulldog's stubbornness. It's a losing situation, as any bulldog owner will tell you. I truly think their obstinate, headstrong, willful characters is possibly why many of us are drawn to them in the first place, as their pig-headed contrariness makes them natural comedians. Why some dogs enjoy eating horse manure is beyond me, but there you go. I was only glad that Maria was not an eyewitness to Zodiac's bizarre antics. With her super sense of cleanliness, if she knew her dog was dining on horse manure, she would be totally and utterly mortified. The dogs bounded happily through the wood green. This was where they could run off the lead, so I quickly unleashed them. They knew the path well. Fortunately, they were usually well behaved, only running a few feet ahead of me. It was a magnificently beautiful day. The sweet uplifting scent of pine filtered through the valley, while the pretty woodland flowers from bluebells to violets, wild geraniums and trout lilies were found growing in random clusters together throughout this idyllic woodland space. The forest was bespeckled with tiny reflectant beams of light that created the same mesmerizing effects as a mirror ball. This moving light danced on the ferns, mosses and flowers like clusters of tiny fairies. All of a sudden, Zodiac began chasing after a little rabbit, but he knew he was no match for the little creature. He managed to make a hasty escape down a burrow. It wasn't long before Zodiac stumbled on the remains of a dead rabbit. He was absolutely thrilled. In a second, it was dangling out of his mouth with a fearsome hold. I assure you, trying to retrieve a dead rabbit from the edge of a bulldog's mouth is no mean feat, and I was having no success whatsoever. "Zodiac," I said, racing towards the feisty bulldog, "drop that rabbit right now. Now, do you hear me? Now, let it go. Let it go." Zodiac was being bloody-minded. He refused to let go of the rabbit. He was belligerent and began to growl at me with a dog language that said, "It's mine." I immediately found a long stick and tried to prise it out of his mouth, poking away at it from the edges, but it was still a futile exercise. My heart sank in the depths of my chest like a wary sun at the end of a hard, grueling day. That was when I saw Mrs. Airedale. She was walking her 2 greyhound dogs through the woods. Did it have to be her of all people? The pretentious woman who thought she was a cut above everybody else in our neighbourhood. She was looking at me with eyes of a vulture, hungry to find some disagreeable things about me that she could report back to the people who hired my dog services. She loved nothing better than causing drama, chaos and discord wherever she went. She was the kind of person you would dread as a neighbour. "Hello there," she said as she approached me. "Is everything all right?" She was watching me beadily, on my knees attending to my nauseating, repugnant rabbit problem with Zodiac, while I was pretending to adjust his fancy Diamante collar. "Oh, absolutely," I lied. "Everything's fine." "Oh, there you are. That's better, Zodiac. Now your collar fits better, doesn't it?" I said, raising myself from the ground into a standing position, smiling warmly at Mrs. Airedale, a fake smile that did not reach my eyes. I suddenly felt very embarrassed, unduly self-conscious about Zodiac's mouthful of dead, decomposing hair, bones and sinew. The last thing I wanted was for Mrs. Airedale to see a dead rabbit hanging out of Zodiac's mouth. It reflected badly on me. What if she thought Zodiac had just killed it, that I had condoned him running around terrorising the rabbit population? I had to cover up for the bulldog's seemingly duplicitous crimes. But looking at Zodiac, he looked as happy as a pig in muck. His flat nose portrayed an innocence that masked his natural mischievous nature. It would seem that Mrs. Airedale was not buying any of it at all. "Oh, something smells quite repugnant," she said, looking directly at Zodiac, her beady, suspicious eyes staring at him like a detective inspector at a police station. "What's that he's got in his mouth? It's very whiffy." "Oh, it's a toy rabbit," I lied, trying my best to defend Zodiac's honour. Or my own. I couldn't decide which. "Well, that rabbit needs a jolly good wash in the washing machine. Just soak it in a bucket, run it in warm water. It should do the trick for you." Why some owners allow their dogs to run amok with filthy toys, it makes the mind boggle. It's not very hygienic. I must say I'm surprised that Maria doesn't take better care of her dog's toys. "My dogs have meticulous bedding," she boasted, "and spotless dog toys that smell of lavender. They're very particular, you know. Never liked rolling in the mud at all, not like that thing over there," she said, throwing Zodiac a disapproving glance. "I never did like bulldogs," she piped. "Slobbery dogs." I nodded in agreement, well, in pretend agreement, as I watched her walking away, but gave up in attempting to retrieve the rabbit from Zodiac's mouth, as frankly it was a fruitless expedience that would not reap any rewards for me. About what must have been 5 minutes later, running directly towards me in the woods were 2 young boys, easily between the ages of 13 or 14. I couldn't be sure. They were wearing balaclavas over their heads, so all I could discern were the eyes staring through the holes. To my horror, I realised they were running directly towards me. One of them stopped a yard away from me, and he began pulling out a revolver, pointing it directly at me. Was this some kind of a prank, I wondered, because if this was some kind of a juvenile joke, I wasn't finding it funny. Not at all. I was so shocked that fear eluded me, like a bird on a wing. But I knew better than to challenge these 2 young boys. Their eyes looked intensely determined. I sensed they clearly meant business. The next thing I knew was one of the boys grabbed Sweetie Pie, the little Boston Terrier, in his arms, running off with her, while the other boy handed me a brown envelope. "Don't worry," said the boy. "You'll get him back if you do as we say. Read the letter." I watched them dart away with Sweetie Pie, who was now yelping. "Stop! Please stop!" But the boys did not listen. They darted away. I could hardly believe what had just transpired, but something in my gut just knew that this was not a practical joke of any kind. I fumbled in my envelope to read the note. It read the following: "We mean you and your dog no harm, but we're desperate for money. In short, your dog has been kidnapped, but he is in good hands. We would like $1,000 for his or her safe return. If you involve the police, you will not get your dog back. Never. If you value your dog's safe return, you will do exactly as we say. We will return your dog to you once you have dropped the envelope on the ground at the tree in the woods that has a yellow balloon attached to it. The drop-off will be at 2:30 a.m. in the morning. One of us will come to collect the envelope, to check the money. Once I give the all clear to my partner, with a secret word that only we know, he will release your dog to you. We do apologise for the emotional upheaval and inconvenience we have caused you. Yours sincerely, 2 well-meaning kidnappers. P.S. Do not try any stupid stunts. We will know if you have called the police." I could hardly believe what I was reading. 2 young boys were so desperate for money they had resorted to kidnapping Maria's dog while demanding a ransom, and not a hefty one at that. I knew instinctively involving the police would be futile, especially for only $1,000, but then again allowing children to get away with such deplorable behaviour was not really acceptable. I mean, they had approached me with a revolver, for goodness sake, which I sneakily suspected probably belonged to their father. I doubted they would have used it on me, but even so it was never worth taking the risk when someone approached you with a revolver, regardless of their age. My father had always taught me that. I glanced down at poor Zodiac, who was wincing. His short tail was tucked under his legs. I glimpsed a sorrowful expression in his dark eyes. Even the limp dead rabbit had lost its appeal. Its flaccid pendulous body was lying by his feet. He made a squeaking sound as we walked away back to Maria's house. He seemed so sad. The walk was lonely, like we were missing a very special part of it, Sweetie Pie. Later that evening I visited Maria. My heart fluttered in my chest with hundreds upon hundreds of butterflies as I knew that Maria would not be happy about Sweetie Pie's disappearance. It seemed I wasn't wrong. The moment she heard me sauntering up her stone steps that led to the front door, she hurriedly opened the door, her face a picture of dread. "What's happened to Sweetie Pie? I got your note saying we need to talk. It scared the hell out of me. Please tell me she's all right. She's not dead, is she? Please, don't say she's dead. She's my baby." "No, Sweetie Pie is not dead. Calm down, Maria. There's nothing to worry about with her, but we do have a problem. It's rather a big problem, I'm afraid." Maria looked at me with eyes growing wide with terror. "Problem? What kind of problem?" "Out with it, Bernice. You're scaring the hell out of me. What kind of a problem?" "Sweetie Pie's been kidnapped." "Kidnapped? Sweetie Pie's been kidnapped?" she said, looking appalled. "But who would kidnap a Boston Terrier? Are you being serious? This is completely insane." "There's a ransom request. The money needs to be dropped off in the early hours of the morning, at about 2:30. Maria gasped, her hands clutching her mouth, as if trying to assimilate the enormity of what I'd told her. "Bernice, I'm not a millionaire, for goodness sake. How much are these people asking for?" $1,000, I said, passing Bernice the letter. She looked heartily relieved. "Only $1,000? I thought it was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, the way you were talking. Well, we're not going to involve the police, that's for sure. I can't risk losing my precious little Sweetie Pie. Poor thing, she must be terrified out of her skin. Thankfully, $1,000 I can well afford. But kids kidnapping a dog? What on earth has the world come to? I think I've seen everything now." For a moment she looked awkward, and then she finally piped, "I do have one problem, Bernice, which is where I need your help." "Of course. Anything. Name it." "Could you please be the one to go to the woods for me, to deliver the ransom? All on your own. I'm so scared of the dark. I couldn't possibly go there in the middle of the night. Oh, it would frighten me so much." My heart sank. In truth, it was intimidating and unnerving venturing into the woods at the dead of night, and I wasn't the bravest person in the world, but I reluctantly agreed. I did hold myself responsible for the outlandish kidnapping in some way. I was awoken to my alarm clock at 2 a.m, but I was already awake. I'd spent the entire last few hours tossing and turning in my sleep. I was in such a dreadful state. I could see the body of my fiancé lying in the bed like a dead log, barely moving at all, except for the rising and falling of his chest. Luckily he didn't respond to the alarm going off. He never ever did. I was thankful he was a deep sleeper, as I didn't want to involve him in my strange escapade. I knew he'd never have allowed me to go into the woods in the dead of night, but this was not a question of choice. It was a prerequisite. It was essential to return Sweetie Pie safely back home. I crept down the staircase stealthily of our double-storey home, terrified that the creaks of the rickety floorboards would give me away, and that my fiancé would catch me sneaking out of the house at this godless hour of the morning. I had been very clever, progressive and forward-thinking enough to retire to my bed in a tracksuit that night. So all I needed to do now was to put on my sneakers, headlamp, and then I'd be good to go. I tiptoed towards the front door, quietly turning the key in the lock, silently as I could. The door was open. I pushed it quietly, closing it behind me, until I heard the familiar click. I then hid the key in the hanging basket outside the front door, cautiously tiptoeing down the drive towards the outside village green that bordered all the properties on our street that were lined with pretty medium-sized oak trees. It was here where I suddenly drew in a deep, calming breath. I had broken out of the house easily. Now I needed to make my way through a whole meadow full of cows, over the clearing, until I finally reached the forest. It seemed rather overwhelming. It was a calm, bright night, which brought me a small measure of solace, as the light of the stunning luminescent moon, along with the clusters of silvery stars, made the world far less daunting. Still, it felt really weird to be up at this outrageous time of the early morning. I hurriedly ran across the green, up the hilly hiking trail, towards the farmer's field. Luckily the cows were on the furthest side of the field grazing. They were oblivious to my presence. It was only when I reached the woods that my heart began to pound violently in my ears, while my breathing quickened. A brisk breeze blew against the jiggling trees. They shuddered, shook, and quaked like belly dancers, moving gracefully to the sounds of the crickets and frogs. There was nothing remotely pretty about the trees tonight, for they reminded me of gargantuan giant shadow people, menacing and evil, covered with ill-omened, baleful eyes, everywhere like the baubles on a Christmas tree. It felt like I was being watched by someone or something hostile and malevolent, while an unwelcome, pervasive energy seemed to envelop me in an ambience that had become almost predatory, unwelcoming, and exceedingly dangerous. I could not afford to think like this. I had an important job to do. I had to find that tree with the yellow balloon attached to its branches, the drop-off point to deliver the ransom. Please God, I thought, let me get this over as fast as I can. I moved forwards cautiously down the hiking trail, soon spotting the tree with the yellow balloon. Relief washed over me like a warm shower over a shivering body. I could do this, I thought. I fumbled around in my pockets, drawing out the brown paper envelope containing the $1,000, placing it on the ground whilst retracting a few steps. I heard a snapping sound, along with a fast-moving tread, as someone was running towards me, a revolver still pointed directly at me, as a young lad wearing a balaclava lunged towards the brown envelope, fumbling through the cash awkwardly, counting it. Finally he said, "It's all here." All of a sudden we heard what I can only describe as the most terrifying, discomposing growl that I have ever heard. It quite literally caused me to jump out of my skin. There are no words to describe that sound to you. The dog kidnapper was equally as unhinged, for he dropped the cash out of his hands, his eyes wide with terror. A heavy pounding sound, like something very hefty, was running towards us. Something big, powerful, like a rhino or elephant. But what was it? I couldn't imagine. Why did we not run for our lives? Why did we wait to see what was coming our way? I cannot answer that question, but all I know is that we both became as solid and still as a wax statue, unable to move a single muscle. It was a taste of fear that I am not acquainted with, a taste so venomous, so lethal, it actually paralyzes its prey, so that the predator can have easy pickings without much physical exertion. We were those easy pickings, the quarry, if you like, or the deliciously succulent steak for whatever was hurtling towards us. I felt as if every ounce of energy had been suctioned out of me, so that I was like a car without petrol, a rusted, inoperative engine, a handbrake pulled up to park. I was immobilized by the disabling effects of fear, a poison so toxic that it rendered me as active and as useless as a dead fish. How I wanted to run, with all my heart and with all my soul, but my legs refused to work, like obstinate children, unwilling to eat their greens. Then we saw him. He thundered through the undergrowth towards us like a bull in a china shop, breaking, fracturing, snapping, smashing and fragmenting branches on his approach, hitting the forest floor with feet so powerful they sounded like ponderous drums. They made the ground beneath us feel hollow. The earth vibrated and shook like an earthquake, almost as if it was cracking open to release a gateway or portal to the insidious, guileful, crooked road that leads to hell. For this creature was like a giant demon that had emerged from the abyss itself, or the fiery depths, a dominion of which there is no light or hope, for all contained within its fiery, hot perimeters are lost forever. He was monstrous, a hideously ugly creature, the most grotesque thing that I've ever seen in my life, with glaring eyes impregnated by a deep, dark evil. Red, treacherous eyes. He was half man and half beast, with long black shoulder-length hair and a full black beard, a leathery dry skin, wrinkled like a wizened tortoise. He towered at 10 foot tall, 1,000 pounds, 4 foot wide. He was thick-set and burly, built like an army tank. His body was shredded with dense muscle. Every pore, every orifice of his body sweated an abhorrent hatred. His smell was odorous, repugnant, decaying and putrefying like dead flesh. He was swathed with long, flowing hair, blacker than the blackest night, so dark it was almost blue, while his human-like teeth almost seemed to be sharpened into daggers. He stood there for a second, yards away from us. In a trice, electric spasms of terror went buzzing and whizzing through my body like a taser. Suddenly, I was coming out of a catonic state. My legs began to revive. They began to awaken, as if emerging from a deep slumber. I realized that the young lad had also found his feet, but the monster grabbed him, then released his hold, retracting for a moment, slamming his fists against his powerful chest again and again, displaying his dominance. Then he delivered another brutal, savage roar. The boy began to scream. He tried desperately to run. It was too late. The creature grabbed him by the collar of his shirt, tugging the boy towards him. He looked fragile, weak, and tiny in the creature's large hands. "Act submissive," I cried. "Kneel down on the ground. Curl up into a ball. Do it! Do it now! Do it! He'll kill you otherwise!" The boy listened to my words. He collapsed on the ground, kneeling in a submissive position. The roaring stopped. The creature calmed down. But he roared again when he saw me. For some reason I'd stopped running. I was standing there like a lemon, watching everything unfold before my eyes, certain I was taking part in a movie. This could not be real, could it? I immediately fell to my knees, curled up in a tight ball. The creature calmed down. He walked around and round us for a long while, breathing heavily like a horse. Once again he pounded his chest and released a roar. Then he turned around in a half-rounded swivel, vanishing into the woods, and was gone from our sight. "Are you all right?" I said to the boy, cradling his face in my knees. He was sobbing like a baby. That thing, it nearly killed me. You saved my life. I feel so ashamed, because you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for us." He promptly handed me the cash in the envelope. "Take it back," he insisted. "Not so fast," I said. "Why do you need this money so badly? No one would go as far as you did to kidnap a dog without good reason. You tell me, why do you need this money so much?" The boy's words wobbled. I could hear the hopeless despair and the grievous hopelessness in it. He said, My mother's dying of cancer. She doesn't have long to live. We don't have much money. We so wanted her to have a good send-off, before she meets her maker. I thought if we could raise the cash, we could take her on one last holiday before she gets seriously ill." "That's very nice of you," I said. "But you should have raised money for your mother at the local church or something. You'd be surprised how many people would have been willing to help your cause. It's a very good cause. You should have more faith in the goodness of people." I handed him the cash. "Keep it," I said. "That's your spending money, to buy candy floss and stuff like that on your holiday. My fiancé happens to work for a travel agent's, a very good travel agent's. He has a holiday to the Bahamas going spare for a family, with all expenses paid. That includes the flight to a luxurious, prestigious hotel, all the accommodation, food and drink. I'll leave the ticket under this tree for you tomorrow. But next time, think twice before you kidnap somebody else's dog, as losing an animal can be very soul-destroying." "Oh, that reminds me," said the boy, calling out, "Brown Owl," which was his secret code to release the dog after the money had been received. Then running towards me was a very excitable sweetie pie, very happy to be reunited with familiarity. He knew he was going home to Maria. He was covering me with sloppy kisses. The boy hugged me. Thank you so much. I don't know what to say after everything we've done to you. I don't know how to thank you for this. It means the world to me." "I know exactly what it means," I said. "I do understand, you know." I never did find out who the mysterious boy was, whose mother had cancer, but I sincerely hope she enjoyed her holiday to the Bahamas. It was a lovely holiday too. I did find a yellow ribbon with a note on the tree thanking me, saying, "To the lovely lady who gave us the holiday free, you'll never know what you've done for us. May God bless you." All these years later, I now know the creature I encountered was a Bigfoot, And that woman dying of cancer got to create some forever memories on a holiday to the Bahamas. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. What would you have done in the same circumstances? Do you think you would have handed over the money to the kid and said, you know what, go and enjoy yourself on a lovely holiday? Or would you have felt that that was rewarding bad behaviour? Until next time, goodbye and good night.